Hey everyone, welcome back to bageltcg. Today we're going to be looking at Bravo Showstopper, and we're going to be looking at a budget version of Bravo Showstopper for a classic constructed after the most recent banned and restricted announcement. So after the most recent banned and restricted, Oldhim and Icelander seem to be getting weaker, as well as Phi is getting slightly weaker, not nearly as much. But those three decks all got a bit of a decrease in power level, which means aggro decks in the form of Dash and Briar are going to be stronger, and Phi is going to remain strong. And then there's a bit of a hole in the meta for a deck that preys on aggro to move in, right? Because Oldhim is getting weaker into aggro, and Icelander is getting weaker into aggro. Bravo is hopefully going to fill that gap, right? So let us look at this deck. I also wanted to feature him because he is one of the most budget-friendly heroes that are in the top 5 heroes, probably. The only other budget-friendly hero in the top 5 heroes is probably Dash. And I did recently do a video on Dash already for her budget list. So I wanted to get these both done. I don't think there's a very good budget way to build Briar or to build Phi. And there's probably not a great budget way to build Icelander or Oldhim either, at least to make them close to the same power level as their upgraded version. But I think Bravo and Dash can be less than 5 to 10%, not a huge difference at all, and be pretty close in power level. So I'm going to be doing this today. I was originally going to do a Dorinthia deck tech because I played her at a ProQuest recently, got top 8, and have been really enjoying her. I also think she's pretty good into the aggro decks right now. And then I also want to do a Viserai deck tech because I think he is a lot stronger now. His worst two matchups were probably Oldhim and Icelander, at least two of the harder ones for him. And since they're getting weaker, I think Viserai is getting stronger. So next week, I will probably be doing Dorinthia and Viserai deck techs for CC. And then the week after that, I think spoilers start for Outsiders. So we'll be focused on spoilers for a week or two there, leading up to Outsiders and then doing some Outsiders theory crafting. So that's kind of the game plan, but let's hop into the budget version. I'll also show a upgraded version at the end, but it's not that many cards different, I'll be honest. Looking at the budget version here, the only legendary equipment piece is Tectonic Plating. I don't think it's a very expensive equipment piece overall. I think it's less than $100. You can see the price of the deck is only 160, and I think Tectonic Plating is probably 80, like at least half of the price. We have a Majestic arm with Crater Fist. These are both played in normal Bravo, and then Iron Rot Legs are also probably what you'll be playing in Bravo a lot of the time. They're totally fine. There's no good Guardian Legs right now. And then Anothos you'll be playing as well. So the only equipment piece we really subbed out is this Helm of Aizen's Peak. This is instead of Crown of Providence, which is a pretty expensive legendary headpiece. But this only blocks for 1 less. So you're only really losing 1 life. And then this is a common that's less than $1, right? It does have an effect, but the effect isn't that easy to use because it doesn't have Go again. So we're mostly wearing this for the block. But this is a pretty good loadout. It gives us 3 block total on our arms, 3 block total on our chest, and then 2 block from our headpiece and feet. So we have 8 block total, which is pretty strong, pretty high number for total block values there. And then the classic weapon for Bravo is Anothos here. It attacks for 4 when you pitch 3 resources. But if you have 2 or more cards in your pitch zone with cost 3 or greater, it gains +2. So it can attack for 6 total power if you have 2 cards in your pitch zone with cost 3 or greater. Then the rest of the deck is basically just a bunch of blues. You can see we have 36 blues here and then 24 reds. Some Bravos do 39 blues and 21 reds. That might be a little safer, but I think with this budget version, this should be fine. And it will look pretty good for how the deck is going to play out. So first, we'll take a look at the reds. Those are kind of Guardian's power cards. We have the classic Bravo specialization, Crippling Crush. This is a very well-known card in Flesh and Blood, one of the OGs from the first ever set. It costs a whopping 7 resources, but it attacks for 11 damage. And if it deals 4 or more damage, they have to discard 2 random cards from their hand. And then with Bravo's hero ability, where we pay 2 resources and then give all attack actions with cost 3 or greater dominate for the rest of the turn, we can pitch 3 blues for 9 resources to come in for 11 dominate and make your opponent discard cards. So pretty powerful synergy there. The other way to do it, which is better versus aggro decks, is often using tectonic plating, which for one resource makes a seismic surge and then has go again. Seismic surges are tokens, and at the beginning of your turn, they destroy themselves and make your next guardian action, attack action, cost 1 less. So you won't use that seismic surge that turn, it'll activate next turn, but that'll make Crippling Crush cost only 6, which means you can pitch an even 2 blues for it for a very powerful 3-card hand. Won't have Dominate then, obviously, but 3 cards to do 11 with a really powerful Crush effect is definitely worth it. So you're looking to either use 2 resources from Bravo if you have a lot of cards to gain Dominate, or especially against aggro decks where you're going to be blocking more, you want to play as low resource as possible while still being able to block. So being able to do this with only 3 cards, including itself, instead of 4 cards is really powerful against aggro. Similarly, we have Chokeslam, red and blue. This is a 4 cost, so with a Seismic Surge, it will only cost 3, making it a powerful 2-card hand. Or if you want to pitch 2 blues for it, you can give it Dominate as well. So once again, 2 kind of options there. One is a little better into aggro because against aggro, once again, you want to be blocking, so you'd prefer to use this for only 3 resources. This comes in for 8, and if it deals 4 or more, once again has a crush. Attack action cards they control can't gain power during their next action phase. So this turns off Artivore, this turns off Channel Mount Heroic, this turns off Teklo Pounder, this turns off a lot of the basically every aggro deck out of Dash, Fi, and Briar are all trying to gain power on their cards at some point or another. So it's a pretty high amount of damage and has a good crush effect. We're playing the blue as well. It has 6 power, which is important for Illusionists. Illusion heroes have their cards destroyed when they're blocked by something with 6 power. So we want to make sure most of our blues have 6 power. And this is not the end of the world if you have to throw this out as well, especially if it only costs you 3. We are playing red and blue Disable. This is another powerful card. This one is one of our second biggest numbers tied to a Spinal Crush over here. This comes in for 9, and if it deals 4 or more, you put a card from their arsenal on the bottom of their deck. So this is especially good when your opponent has cards in arsenal that you can destroy. I guess not destroy, it goes on the bottom, but you can get rid of, which gains you an extra card, right? If every card is worth between 3 and 4 damage, this is kind of blocking for 3 as well if it gets its effect off, because you're taking away 3 potential damage that they could have had. So it's even powerful. If it connects and does everything, that's like 12 damage almost that you're really converting. And then, of course, we play the blues as well. The blues quite good, still has 7 power there. We're playing the classic defense reactions of Sink Below and Fate Foreseen. These are just really good rates. They cost 0, they block for 4. This one will opt 1, and then Sink Below lets you put a card on bottom of your deck to draw a new one. So both lets you kind of filter what cards you're seeing and block for a really good rate. Obviously 4 is about the best you can get from a card. We've got the red and blue pommels here. This is our only reaction for attacks. We do have those defense reactions we just looked at, but this is our only attack reaction, and it's very powerful. You can use it on Anathos to get +4, but the main part is if you use it on attack action, it not only gets an attack action, I should say, with cost 2 or greater, which I believe are all of our attack actions. Not only does he get the +4, it also gains, if this hits, the defending hero discards a card, right? Which is awesome. +4 is also really important because all the crush effects care about dealing 4 or more damage. So if you attack with red Disable, the opponent blocks with 3 cards for a total of 9. You can still pummel it, and you'll deal 4 damage, triggering the discard effect and the arsenal effect from the crush. So dealing +4 is pretty nice. We play the blues as well. This is mostly going to be for pitching for 3 resources, but it is a nice backup. And if you ever have a hand with a lot of cards, you know, your opponent doesn't do much, you don't need a block, and you can keep this. It's a nice card to be able to get that extra discard effect off. We do have Spinal Crush. This is another classic card here. It's a Majestic, and it is really, really powerful against aggro decks. If it crushes, meaning deals 4 more damage, they basically lose Go Again on everything. Go Again goes away from their hero, action cards, activated abilities, and attacks. I don't know anything that it doesn't remove go again from basically. Excuse me. It'll take go again away from everything. So they just get one action on their turn. It'll even, like I said, it takes a go again away from even, equipment, right? So if they try to use go again on tectonic plating, that would be all they can do that turn is activate tectonic plating. So very, very, very good against aggro decks, and definitely needs to be required 3-up. It's one of the more expensive cards in the deck. I think it's like $5 to $10 a piece, but it's really hard to play Bravo without Spinal Crush. It's so good into the aggro decks. The last of our reds here is Zealous Belting. This is a pretty aggressive card that comes in for a nice amount of damage. It is 2 resources for 5 damage, and it has go again if you have a card in your pitch zone with power greater than it, right? So a lot of your blues have 6 power, like this one, 8 power, 6 power, 8 power, 8 power. Those all are greater than 5 power, right? So if you pitch any of those to play this, it'll have go again. And then you can pitch a second blue to swing Anathos. And if both of those blues have cost 3 or greater, Anathos will get +2 power, right? So that's 2 cards to pitch, and then the Zealous Belting for a total of 11 damage or threatening, which is pretty good. 3 cards for 11 damage is pretty good here for Bravo, and it is one of the only ways we can use 2 attacks in one turn. That can be pretty important to aggress against decks that are more defensive, and to destroy stuff like dragons against Dromai, where you need to attack multiple times per turn to kill multiple dragons. A lot of the rest of the blues are just here to either block for 3, to pitch for 3 resources and cost 3 or greater for Anathos. We're not playing these very often. It's almost always better to block with this than it is to play it. 4 resources for 6 damage is not very good. I would rather pitch just 3 resources to attack with Anathos for 4 damage. The only reason that we have all these 6s, the reason we chose these over other blues, I should say, is because since it's at 6, it'll give go again to Zealous Belting, and it'll destroy anything with Phantasm that an illusionist opponent might have. So you don't need to worry too much about the play effects here. Buckling Blow is not very strong on the play effect. Debilitate is okay with a -2, but once again, it has to deal 4 or more, so if they block it for 3, it turns it off. Cranial Crush is okay, it makes it so they can't draw. This one attacks for 8, which isn't bad. Macho Grande is probably one of the better blues because it has Dominate built in. So for the 7 resources, or if you have a Seismic Surge, it'll only cost 6. It'll be for 8 Dominate. And you can close out some games if your opponent's at 3 or 4 life. They can't really block usually that dominated attack. So the 8s are a little better because with Dominate, even from Bravo, you can maybe get over the top when your opponent's low. Rouse the Ancients is one of the only blues that we really want to play. We want to play this card a lot. It's very, very powerful. It costs 3, and it says it attacks for 0, but if you reveal any number of attack actions with 13 or total power, so you can reveal 2 8s, for example. If you have 2 of these for 16 power, you can reveal this 8 and this 5 here for 13 power. As long as you're revealing total of 13 or more power from your hand, it gets +7 power and go again. So this is a 3 for 7 go again, which is even better than Zealous Belting, right? This is 2 for 5 go again. This one's 3 for 7 go again, and then you can pitch another blue to attack with Anathos for a 3-card 13 power hand, which is even better, right? So a great blue that we actually want to play, but once again, it costs 3 or more, so it's fine to pitch for Anathos. Showtime is one of our other specializations. This is mostly a 3-cost blue that blocks 3. It's basically never right to play this. The only time you ever want to play this card, really, is if you are going first. If you're going first, which means there's not really any good reason to attack anyways, because your opponent can just block for free and draw back up. This is a pretty good card because it'll search your deck for a Guardian card, put it into your hand, you can arsenal it, and then at the beginning of your next turn, after you've probably had to block a little, it'll destroy itself and draw a card. So it's worth being in the deck because it's a blue that 3 blocks and costs 3, but you almost never want to play it unless you are the very first turn of the game, right? Not even on the second turn. If your opponent's going first, you still probably don't play it. It's if you are what we call turn 0, the very, very first turn of the game. Last 3 blues is Thunderquake here. This is another 6 for 8 blue. mostly for pitching or blocking. Unmovable is nice because it's a blue 3 block, but sorry, 3 cost, but it's actually a defense reaction that blocks for 5, and if it's played from your arsenal, it gets +1. So it's a flexible card that can be a defense reaction against decks that go a bit taller, or it can just pitch. Against aggro decks, they usually don't attack for 6, and playing it from your hand isn't really worth it because it's 2 cards to block 5 when you could just use 2 cards to block 6 instead. So this is mostly not being played against the aggro decks unless it's in your arsenal and you can pitch 2 cards to block with it. It's mostly for like other guardians, for example, or maybe brutes. Decks that that are going to have a bit of bigger attacks than just doing 1 or 2 attacks a turn. And then the other blue that we're going to play a lot, basically the main blues we play are Rouse the Ancients and Tear Asunder, the only 2 blues that are really worth playing. This is a 3 cost. It has Go Again. It's a blue and blocks 3. Your next Guardian attack this turn, not just attack action, any attack, which counts your weapon. Your next Guardian attack gains +1 power, dominate, and if that's a hero, they discard 2 cards. They do get to choose these 2 cards. It's not random like Crippling Crush, but Crippling Crush has to deal 4 or more. This just says hit, so it just needs to deal 1 damage. If you pitch a blue that costs 3 or more to play this, and then you pitch another blue that costs 3 or more to Anathos, you're attacking, it'll get the +1 dominate and on hit from Tear Asunder, and then it'll get the +2 from itself. So that is 3 cards for 7 dominate, discard 2. So it's kind of a mini Crippling Crush. If you have a huge hand, you can throw it on top of something like a Spinal Crush, a Disable, any of these blues for 8s to make it 9 dominate. You can do a lot with this. It's a very flexible card. It's one of the ones you want to block with as little as you can. Try to use it for pitching instead. Rouse the Ancients and Tear Asunder are basically what you're prioritizing for pitching blues. The rest of your blues, like these, Thunderquake, Cranial Crush, Buckling Blow, Debilitate, Showtime, Macho Grande, Disable, Chokeslam, those are all fine to block with if you don't need them for pitching or if it's better to block with them. But Tear Asunder and Rouse the Ancients, you'd really prefer to use or to pitch for later in your deck. You can block with it if you have to. Obviously, it blocks for 3, which is fine, but they're so powerful you'd rather not use them for that. That is the deck. I know I basically went over every card because I feel like budget decks are often more for beginner players, and I want to kind of give a breakdown of everything. I apologize if I talk too fast. I just wanted to get it all done in a kind of timely manner. Looking at the sideboard here, we have some kind of new technology from Dynasty, which is the Steel Braid Buckler. Say that 10 times fast. It blocks for 2 with Temper, which means after you block with it, you put a -1 counter on it, so then it'll block for 1. And then after you block with it, then it destroys itself once it's at 0. This is for the aggro decks, because against aggro, you're often blocking with all 3 of your cards, and then just using 1 blue to attack for 4, right? But 1 blue also attacks for 4 with Titan's Fist, because if you pitch a card with cost 3 or greater, it has +1 power, so it'll be a 1 card 4, just like Anathos. But this gets you 3 extra health, because since this is only a one-handed hammer, you get to play this shield along with it, which gives you that 3 extra health, and not much of a loss, right? Because it's usually not good against aggro decks. You're the more defensive deck. You're the disruptor, the defensive deck. Usually you are either blocking with 3 cards for 9 total, right? You might block with, if you draw all 4 of these cards in a row right here, right? Let's say you draw 1 of each of these, you'll block maybe with these first 3 for 9, and then you'll pitch this last one here to attack with this for 4, right? That's a pretty fine hand. It would be way worse to, keep both of these, play this, right, and then block with this, because what that does is you block 3, you have to then take the 6 damage, so you're down 6 life instead of blocking all, and you're only threatening 4 more, right? So you're taking 6 more, but only threatening 4 more. So it's usually better to block than attack. The exception is if you have really good attacks like Spinal Crush or Crippling Crush or Chokeslam. Those are kind of the 3 best cards against aggro. Chokeslam, Crippling Crush, and Spinal Crush. But once again, if they're about to just destroy you, if their turn is so crazy strong, they're doing 20 plus damage, it might still be worth it just to block instead. you are the defensive deck. If you need to block with all 4 cards even, that's not the end of the world. If you're blocking with, if you draw this 4 card hand right here, Chokeslam, Crippling, Crush, Disable, Fate Foreseen, they're all reds. You can't play any of them or pitch them. It's not the end of the world if you need to block for the, what is that, 13 damage right here. That's fine. So that's what that's for. We have the 3 Arcane Barrier here. If you're against the Rune Blade, you're just going to play Null Rune Boots here. You're going to play those instead of Iron Rot Legs. If you're against the Wizard, you're going to play all 3. So you'll play all 3 Null Rune against Wizards. Against Rune Blades, you'll just play the Null Rune Boots because you only need the Arcane Barrier 1. These 2 Crush the Weak are for aggro decks that have cards with 3 or less base power. So specifically Fi, these are really helpful against. They're okay against Dash. I would still play them against Dash. And then I would probably not play them against Briar. But against Dash and Fi, these are pretty good cards that Crush the Weak here. And I would probably take out these Zealous Beltings. These only block for 2. And it's really important to try to get basically all of your cards to block for 3 against aggro. Some cards it's fine, like this Rousey Ancients only blocks for 2, but it's a blue, so you can pitch it to swing your Titan's Fist. And then Pummel is also a blue. And then Red Pummel is the only red that we're going to probably run against aggro decks that blocks for 2, because discarding a card for the aggro decks is so bad for them. So it's worth it to play the Pummels against the aggro decks because you're trading a card. But Zealous Belting is not worth it against aggro decks, so we'd rather play these Crush the Weaks. You would probably, against 5, for example, take out the 3 Zealous Belting, play 2 Crush the Weak and 1 Pulverize. You're probably never going to play this Pulverize against them because it costs 10, but it does block for 3, which makes it worth it just to block with. The only decks you're playing these against that you really want to resolve them is other Guardians, right? They attack for 14 damage, but they cost 10. They're very hard to get off. Heaving lets your opponent get a ton of information, so it's not always great to do anyways. Often you're going to Arsenal this, and then you're either going to play it off of 3 blues using a Seismic Surge, or 4 blues giving it Dominate. But it's just a very hard card to get off. We have 2 of them for the Guardian matchup. They're also fine into stuff like Brute that has pretty big attacks. They're okay into Ranger maybe. But you kind of need to figure out what decks you think this is good against. But obviously, against aggro decks, you're going to be blocking way too much. This Oasis Respite is just for Kano. You just play it against Kano. As soon as you find it, you need to Arsenal it. And then as soon as they play Aether Wildfire, it looks like they're going to try to kill you with it. You'll play this and you'll try to prevent Aether Wildfire with it. These 2 Smashing Good Times are for Dash specifically. That's one of our harder matchups because they can set up their item endgame where they just put a bunch of items out and pistol you to death. So the goal here is to put this into your arsenal, play it to give your next attack +3, and then destroy an item, and then use it on dominated attacks that are really big, right? So let's say I go Smashing Good Time from Arsenal for +3, and then I play Disable with Dominate using my hero power to come in for 12 Dominate. It's going to be hard for them to block that, and then as long as it hits, you get to destroy their items. You want to... it's a little better to prioritize the Plasma Purifiers, I guess, but it's okay to hit the Induction Chambers too. I guess to see how many they have. It kind of depends. I think Oldham specifically would want to really hit the Plasma Purifiers. I think Bravo can hit either one and it's okay. I guess I would prioritize Plasma Purifiers, but it's okay either way. These Zealous Beltings are for... These are for Dromai, and for any deck we're trying to be the aggressor against, right? So against Icelander, for example, we're trying to be the aggro deck. And they're the one blocking a bit more, so these are good into Icelander. And then against Dromai, they hit for 4 with Go Again, so that lets us kill something like a Mirror Guy, for example, that's stopping our Phantasm. So pretty nice there. I would play them for those 2 matchups. And then the Remembrance is lets us go in the Guardian Mirror, basically, and then Dorinthia. Those are the only 2 matchups, which are Bravo, Oldham, and Dorinthia, that usually we play like all of our cards, like 75 cards, basically. Or what is that? Yeah, 75 cards. 70 cards. Sorry, we have 5 equipment here. We play like all 70 cards because we're basically going to try to deck each other out. You're just blocking a bunch and using your weapon. And Remembrance lets us get 3 of our threats back. So like 3 of our Crippling Crushes back, some Pulverizes, anything like that is against those and those really late game decks. But that is the deck. It is $160 according to Fabrary. I think when I plugged it into actual TCG Player, it was like 173 or something after tax. I was gonna go over like sideboard tips and play patterns now, but I kind of think I did that throughout the video already. When to block, against aggro decks, blocking with everything and then attacking with Titan's Fist. Against aggro decks also like Phi, Dash, and Briar. Because you usually don't want to spend so many cards to attack with cards like the Crippling Crush here, because you're going to have to take so much damage. The better option usually is to Arsenal them. So specifically Crippling Crush and Spinal Crush. You're going to want, and Chokeslam as well, you'll want to Arsenal them when you can. When they're putting on a lot of pressure, you can Arsenal them. And then whenever they have a slower turn, you can see they're putting out less damage than they usually would. You can choose to take maybe a little bit of damage and then throw this out to really change the pace of the game in your favor, right? You don't want to take 15 damage just to play Crippling Crush. You will die. It's not worth it. The only time you usually want to play Crippling Crush is when you're taking less than it's going to deal. Otherwise, it's better to block with it or Arsenal it for later, right? So you want to make sure you are the defensive get deck against aggro decks specifically, and you want to be blocking, right? The other option is to use your equipment to block. Let's say they end the turn with a Snatch for 4. You can block with 2 on Tectonic, 2 on Crater Fist, and then that lets you save some cards to attack with the Crippling Crush or Spinal. But really, just don't take unnecessary damage. You are the blocking deck. If you block the whole game, you might still win because they might just run out of cards, right? So just block. Use your Titan's Fist to attack for 4 every turn if you can. It's a pretty good rate to turn 1 card into 4 damage, because if you think about it, on blocking, it's only 3. So turning it into 4 is pretty good. We have a few things that block for 4, but not many. Yeah, that's kind of into aggro. And then against decks that aren't as aggressive, once again, still don't take too much damage to play your big cards. You can Arsenal them for later if you think you aren't going to be able to play them that turn without taking a bunch. Use your equipment to stop some damage when you're ready to play your big card if you think it's worth it there, especially on hit triggers from your opponent. That's kind of the main tips for Bravo. And I think I went over a lot of the sideboard. Let's just look at the upgraded version. You can see it's a lot more money, but it's actually not that many cards different. The main cards that are really expensive is this Crown of Providence as our headpiece. It blocks 1 more, but it has a really good effect too. When you block with it, you can put a card from your hand or arsenal on the bottom of your deck. If you do, you draw a card. So this lets you really filter cards and sculpt a very powerful hand. You use this generic headpiece in a lot of decks. So it's definitely worth it to pick up. It's in the majority of Flesh and Blood decks right now, but I do think it's like almost $200. So if this is like what I would upgrade first, but it's going to take a while. And then we switched out the 3 red disables for 3 Command and Conquer. This is the first card we're adding to the deck, basically, that we can't really dominate with Bravo, other than the Zealous spell things, because it doesn't cost 3 or greater. But it is such a powerful generic. This is also used in the majority of Flesh and Blood decks, because it also destroys the arsenal just like red disable does, but defense reactions cannot be played to its chain link, which is so powerful. If your opponent has a Sink Below in their arsenal, in their hand, they cannot use it to stop the Command and Conquer. They have to block with normal cards. And then you can pummel the Command and Conquer, which is already in the reaction step, and they are no longer able to defense react it because of this text. So if you pummel a Command and Conquer, there is nothing your opponent can do to stop it. They just have to lose their arsenal, lose a card from hand. It's very punishing, but I do think it's like $80 per Command and Conquer. The other thing we switched is these Mage Master boots. These have an action. These are common. They're very cheap, but they cost 1 resource to give your next non-attack go again. And you just play these for this Toma Fiendal. This is like a $10 card, I think. It draws 2 cards, and then you gain a life for each card in your hand. So what you would do here, you would Arsenal this because it only gains the life from your arsenal. You will wait till your opponent has a slower turn, and then you'll pitch 1 blue to destroy this, give this go again, play this, and then you will have 5 cards and gain 5 life. So a very powerful combo. It's basically the only thing that you will use the Mage Master boots for. You could use it on Showtime, but it's not nearly as good as on the Tome of Yendal. But honestly, Iron Rot boots that we have here are not much, or Iron Rot legs are not much worse. We're also playing these buckles. These are like a very bad version of Terra Sunder. It gives your next Guardian attack +1 to dominate, just like Terra Sunder does, and it works on Anathos. But the hit effect is not nearly as good. It just destroys an equipment with the -1 counter. Destroying equipment is not nearly as good as, against most decks at least, is not nearly as good as making them discard cards, and it has to have a -1 counter on it already. Those are the only changes in the main deck. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's only 7 cards different in the main deck, and then these 2 equipment. Sideboard doesn't change at all, so it's only 7 cards different main, 2 in the side, so only 9 cards different out of the 80. But those 9 cards add like $500+. The deck will perform amazing for you in this budget version. You can still win ProQuest, you can still win Armories. Bravo is all about patience. The main thing you will lose to, I promise, is yourself. You might get high rolled sometimes, but the majority of the time it's because you took 15 damage because you wanted to play this Crippling Crush, but you shouldn't have. You should have blocked with the Crippling Crush. It's a Guardian in general is all about patience. It's about self-control, blocking more than you probably think you should. You block better than most decks. If you look at the stats here, your average defense value is 3.0. I promise you, if you look at most decks, their average defense value is not 3.0. It's probably 2.5 or so. We block really good. We have a good weapon. Be patient. Yeah, and I think those are the main things. I will have the budget deck and the upgraded deck linked in the description. Any questions about Bravo, let me know. It's probably my most played hero. This and Oldham, I play a ton of Guardian. Lately, I've been playing some Briar a lot. I've been enjoying her. You can see my recent Royal Briar deck text. That's like the deck I've been playing locally a lot. And then I've been playing some Dorinthia just a little bit as well. But my favorite decks, for the longest time that I have the most experience on is certainly Guardian. So I can answer any questions. Just let me know in the comments. I think this budget deck is very powerful. And yeah, thank you. Let me get any feedback is appreciated. Remember to like, subscribe, comment. I'll see you guys next time.